Hi everybody, welcome to my inner sanctum. My name's Adam Courtenay. I've just completed this book, The Ghost and the Bounty Hunter, but you may also know this book. This is the book I wrote a couple of years ago called The Ship That Never Was. I'm here today because we're all suffering under this coronavirus problem, and they asked me to do a video, and I think it's good for you to see a little bit about my life. This is where I wrote it. This is my study right here, and we'll show you around a little. There's not much to show except here's my mascot here, Polly. There's a picture of her up there. Polly's the one who had to endure a year of me doing all this. It's a picture here of my father and my mother, Bryce and Benita. That's in the Loire Valley back in the 80s. I think he was around about the time he was just about to start writing himself. He sort of left that holiday and decided he wanted to write after that. Here you might see, this is Bryce's chair, Bryce Courtenay's chair. He wrote the last 4 books here, and just before he died he sort of bequeathed it to me and said, hopefully you'll use this as much as I did. So here we go, Bryce Courtenay's actual chair. It's a little bit rickety, but there you go. It works, and I wrote a couple of books on this. But I'd like to read you an extract today. It's the very beginning of the book. It's about the first time Europeans saw William Buckley, the giant. And I hope you find it interesting because William Buckley was something of an enigma. I shall start with the prologue right now. Okay. At around 2 p.m. on the 6th of July 1835, the ever-alert John Pigeon gasped and dropped his billy can. Pigeon was a well-travelled Aboriginal man from the southern coast of New South Wales. He had worked for the wealthy grazier John Batman in Van Diemen's Land for nearly a decade, travelled and walked with many tribes throughout the continent, and lived with the Palawa and European settlers on the coast. He had seen many things, but he had never seen this. A giant appeared at the far end of the camp. He was so clearly a white man, and so clearly not. He was the tallest and most powerful human Pigeon had ever laid eyes on. He was middle-aged, his complexion ruddy and sunburnt, his grey beard falling below his chest. He held his gaze on the 8 men in camp with just the slightest hint of suspicion. The man was shoeless and dressed in well-worn possum skins. In his left hand he carried a giant mongile, a double-barbed spear 10 feet in height, the most feared of all weapons. In his right he had a waddy or club known as a kudgerong, designed to strike opponents on the head. At his feet he had a number of boomerang-shaped wonging, the first recourse in battle, designed to break legs and inflict heavy wounds. He held these implements lightly and deftly, the way Pigeon's people did. His stance and bearing showed he knew how to use them, but his mien was unmistakably that of a white man. And yet, only an indigenous person could have come in so close to the camp without his noticing. White men knew nothing of stealth. Pigeon, one of Bratman's most brilliant trackers, never missed a thing. By Pigeon's estimation, this man had the bearing of a white Nrungeta, that is, in Rawadarung language, an elder man of knowledge. There was no other name for what he now saw. In a few moments, everybody in the camp had seen the man. There were a few gasps, then nobody spoke. The 3 white and 5 Aboriginal men sat transfixed, looking in wonder at each other, then back at the apparition. There was no alarm. Nobody rushed to their guns. Nobody moved. It was as if a spirit had come to visit them, floating in from a place nobody could quite divine, hovering for reasons none could understand. An astonishing spirit, but not a harmful one. The giant betrayed no emotion. Soon he sat at the edge of the camp, not far from where Pigeon and his men had set up their tents. He was impassive, almost motionless, looking askance at everyone. His war and hunting implements were now propped between his legs. Eventually the stunned silence wore off, and the sprightly James Gum, an ex-convict from Southampton, walked over to the man and started talking. He showed no signs of comprehension. It's probable he had some understanding of the working class Hampshire accent of Gum, but his own tongue movements in relation to his upper palate had changed since he had last spoken to a fellow white man. He couldn't remember, let alone form the English words that had once come naturally. He also didn't want to say who he was, not just yet. He first wanted to figure out if these men were friendly. They cut up a piece of bread and handed it over. Then he remembered. He later described it as, quote, a cloud passing over his brain. Bread, he said. It was the first English word he had uttered in 32 years. Thanks very much for listening. I hope you enjoy the excerpt and enjoy this book that I've just written, The Ghost and the Bounty Hunter. Thanks very much for listening. Bye.